Imagine being a divine whistleblower, forced to deliver messages that infuriate the powerful and terrify the ordinary. This was the life of a prophet in the Old Testament. Throughout the Old Testament, the lives of prophets were often marked by persecution and tragic ends. Their unwavering dedication to delivering messages from God sometimes led to them facing brutal fates at the hands of those who rejected their prophecies. Let's examine the accounts of some of these prophets and the harrowing ways in which they met their demise. Keep in mind that some of these accounts come from sources outside of the Bible and were often passed down as traditions, and in many cases, it is difficult to verify their historical accuracy. Number 1 is Isaiah. Isaiah was a major prophet in the Hebrew Bible and is considered one of the most important biblical figures in both Judaism and Christianity. He is best known for his prophetic book, which is the longest of the prophetic books in the Bible. The name Isaiah means Yahweh is salvation, highlighting the central theme of his message. Isaiah's ministry spanned over several decades, starting in the year King Uzziah died in approximately 742 BC and continuing through the reigns of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, who were all kings of Judah. He was a contemporary of the prophets Micah and Hosea. His message was primarily directed towards the kingdom of Judah, warning them of impending judgment if they continued to stray from their covenant with God. He also predicted the coming of the Messiah and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. Isaiah was also known for his boldness in speaking God's word. He often spoke out against the corrupt leaders and false prophets of his time. Some of his messages were met with opposition, and he faced persecution for his prophetic ministry. Isaiah is said to have met a gruesome end during the reign of King Manasseh of Judah. According to extra-biblical sources, Isaiah was sawn in half with a wooden saw, a barbaric act that silenced his prophetic voice forever. The tradition of Isaiah being sawn in half is primarily derived from Jewish and Christian extra-biblical sources, particularly from Jewish tradition and early Christian writings. One of the earliest and most prominent sources that mention Isaiah's death by being sawn in half is the Jewish text called the Ascension of Isaiah, which is considered to be a pseudepigraphal work dating back to the 1st century CE. Additionally, early Christian writers such as the church father Origen and the historian Eusebius of Caesarea also referenced the tradition of Isaiah's martyrdom by being sawn in half. These early Christian sources further propagated the belief in this manner of Isaiah's death among early Christian communities. Number 2 is Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a major prophet in the Bible who lived during the late 7th and early 6th centuries BC. He is known as the Weeping Prophet because of his sorrowful messages and the suffering he endured while delivering them. His life and ministry are recorded primarily in the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament. During his lifetime, Jeremiah saw the Assyrian Empire fall and the Babylonian Empire rise, ultimately leading to the destruction of the southern kingdom of Judah and the exile of its people. Jeremiah's ministry began during a period of spiritual revival under King Josiah, who had implemented religious reforms in Judah. However, as time went on, the people of Judah returned to their idolatrous ways, and God called Jeremiah to warn them of the impending judgment. Despite his faithful warnings, Jeremiah faced opposition and persecution from the people and leaders of Judah. He was mocked, imprisoned, and even thrown into a cistern during the reign of King Jehoiakim. However, God continued to protect and deliver him, and Jeremiah remained faithful to his calling. The date and circumstances of Jeremiah's death are not recorded in the Bible. However, according to tradition, he was stoned to death in Egypt for his unwavering faithfulness to God and his prophecies. Christian sources, such as the writings of church fathers like Origen and Jerome, echo the account of Jeremiah's death by stoning and incorporate it into the broader narrative of persecution faced by prophets in the Old Testament. Number 3 is the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel was another prominent prophet in the Bible who lived during the Babylonian captivity. He is believed to have been born in 622 BC, during the reign of King Josiah in Judah. His name means God strengthens, or may God strengthen. Ezekiel's prophetic ministry began in 593 BC at the age of 30, when he was taken into captivity along with King Jehoiakim and other members of the Jewish community by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. This event marked the beginning of the Babylonian exile, which lasted for 70 years. Ezekiel was from a priestly lineage and was trained as a priest. but God called him to be a prophet. He was married and his wife died while he was still in exile. Throughout his ministry, Ezekiel also served as a watchman for the people of Israel, warning them of the consequences of their sins and calling them to repentance. He also spoke against the false prophets and leaders who were leading the people astray. In addition to his prophecies, Ezekiel also received messages of hope and restoration for the people of God. He prophesied about the coming of a new covenant, in which God would write his law on the hearts of his people and give them a new spirit. He also prophesied about the restoration of Israel and the future glory of Jerusalem. Ezekiel's ministry lasted for approximately 22 years, and he continued to receive visions and messages from God until his death in Babylon. Ezekiel, known for his vivid visions and symbolic actions, met a violent end as well. It is said that he was chopped into pieces under the orders of an enraged prince, a brutal conclusion to a life dedicated to proclaiming God's message. While the specific origin of the tradition of Ezekiel being killed by being chopped into pieces cannot be definitively pinpointed, it likely arose from a combination of rabbinic teachings, Jewish folklore, and Christian interpretations of the prophet's life and ministry. The story of Ezekiel's death serves as a powerful and dramatic depiction of the challenges and dangers faced by prophets in delivering God's message. Number 4 is Amos. Amos was a prophet in ancient Israel who lived during the 8th century BC. He is recognized as the first of the writing prophets, and his book, which bears his name, is the third of the 12 minor prophets in the Bible. Amos was a contemporary of the prophet Hosea, and they both served during the reign of King Jeroboam II of Israel. Very little is known about Amos outside of the book of Amos. He is believed to have been a shepherd and a farmer from the town of Tekoa, which was located about 6 miles south of Jerusalem. Amos 1:1 mentions him as among the shepherds of Tekoa, and Amos 7:14 describes him as a herdsman and a tender of sycamore fruit. This profession suggests that Amos was of humble origins, as shepherds and farmers were often from the lower class in ancient Israel. According to the book of Amos, he began his prophetic ministry during the reign of King Uzziah of Judah and King Jeroboam II of Israel, which places him sometime between 793 and 753 BC. This means that Amos prophesied about 40 years before the fall of Israel in 722 BC. This period was marked by political stability and economic prosperity in Israel, which was the northern kingdom of divided Israel. Amos was called by God to leave his home in Tekoa and travel to the wealthy city of Bethel in the kingdom of Israel to deliver a message of judgment and warning to the people of Israel. He spoke out against the injustices and corruption in Israelite society, particularly regarding the treatment of the poor and vulnerable. He also condemned the religious hypocrisy of the people and their lack of true devotion to God. Amos's prophecies caused tension and opposition from the people and religious leaders of Israel. Amaziah, the priest of the Bethel temple, accused Amos of conspiring against the king and demanded that he leave the city and return to his own land. Amos responded by pronouncing judgment against Amaziah and a final warning to Israel. Despite the opposition, Amos remained faithful to his calling and continued to deliver God's message. In the end, his prophecy came true as the northern kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrians in 722 BC, just as he had predicted. Like many of the Old Testament prophets, the Bible does not mention anything regarding the time and circumstances of Amos's death. The extra-biblical tradition regarding the death of the prophet Amos varies depending on different sources. One prominent tradition comes from the Jewish historian Josephus, who lived in the 1st century AD. In Josephus's work, Antiquities of the Jews, he provides an account of Amos's death. According to Josephus, he recounts that Amos, after being rejected by the people of Israel for his prophetic warnings, was captured and brought before the high priest Amaziah. Josephus describes that Amaziah accused Amos of conspiracy against the king, as it is written in Amos chapter 7 verse 12, saying, "Seer, go away into the land of Judah, eat your bread there, prophesy there, but never again prophesy at Bethel, for it is the sanctuary of the king and a royal dwelling place." In response, Amos adamantly refused this order, declaring that he did not choose to be a prophet, but was chosen by God. Amos's unwavering commitment to his prophetic mission led to his martyrdom, as Josephus describes that he was slain with a wooden lance or pole upon the head by an onlooker. Number 5 is Zechariah. Zechariah, son of Jehoiada, is a biblical character who is mentioned in the Old Testament of the Bible. He is described as a prophet, priest, and a godly man who served in the temple during the reigns of King Joash and King Amaziah of Judah. According to 2 Chronicles, Zechariah was the son of Jehoiada, a prominent priest during the reign of King Joash of Judah. He is believed to have been born in the late 9th century BC and lived during a significant period in Jewish history. During his time, Judah was divided between two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The kingdom of Israel was led by King Jeroboam II, who ruled from 793 BC to 753 BC, while Judah was ruled by King Joash from 835 BC to 796 BC. Zechariah is first mentioned in 2 Chronicles 24:20-22 when he confronted the people of Israel for their disobedience to God and their worship of idols. He prophesied that because of their sins, God would bring judgment upon them. This angered Joash, who was influenced by the ungodly leaders of Judah, and he ordered for Zechariah to be stoned to death in the temple courtyard. This act of violence against a prophet of God led to Joash experiencing God's judgment. Shortly after, Joash was defeated in battle by the Arameans, and he was assassinated by his own servants. Zechariah's death is marked as a significant turning point in the history of Judah. His murder in the temple was seen as a desecration of the holy place and a symbol of the corruption and apostasy of the people under Joash's reign. Number 6 is Uriah. Uriah, often overshadowed by more prominent prophets, played a crucial role in the tumultuous period leading up to the Babylonian exile. His life, though briefly mentioned in the Bible, highlights the perils faced by those who dared to speak truth to power. Uriah was a prophet during the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah. His ministry is briefly chronicled in Jeremiah 26:20-23. Uriah hailed from a city with a significant religious heritage located to the west of Jerusalem. He emerged during a time of intense political and spiritual upheaval in Judah, a period marked by rampant idolatry and moral decay. Like Jeremiah, Uriah boldly proclaimed messages of impending judgment upon Jerusalem and Judah, warning the people of the dire consequences of their unfaithfulness to God. His prophecies echoed those of Jeremiah, foretelling disaster as a result of the nation's persistent sinfulness. These messages, however, were not well received by the ruling class, who viewed them as threats to their power and stability. King Jehoiakim, unlike his father Josiah, who had instituted significant religious reforms, was hostile to prophetic warnings and deeply opposed to any message that challenged his authority. Uriah's prophecies, predicting the destruction of Jerusalem, were perceived as seditious and deeply unsettling for the king and his administration. Fearing for his life, Uriah fled to Egypt, seeking refuge from Jehoiakim's wrath. Egypt, at the time, was seen as a potential ally against the Babylonian threat and a place of relative safety for those fleeing persecution in Judah. However, Uriah's hope for sanctuary was short-lived. Jehoiakim, determined to silence all opposition, sent men to Egypt to apprehend him. The mission to capture Uriah was successful. He was forcibly brought back to Jerusalem, where Jehoiakim's ruthless nature came to the fore. Unlike Jeremiah, who had powerful allies to protect him, Uriah was not afforded any trial or defense. Instead, he was executed by the sword, a clear message from Jehoiakim that dissent would not be tolerated. After his execution, Uriah's body was disgracefully cast into a common burial ground, denying him the dignity of a proper burial. This act of desecration further illustrated the king's contempt for Uriah and his prophetic mission. The manner of Uriah's death starkly contrasted with the respect typically accorded to prophets, emphasizing the extent of Jehoiakim's hostility toward those who challenged his rule. Uriah's tragic end underscores the brutal realities faced by prophets who spoke out against injustice and corruption. His story, though brief, is a powerful testament to the risks inherent in the prophetic vocation. It serves as a sobering reminder of the courage required to stand up against oppressive regimes and the high price often paid for speaking truth to power. The narrative of Uriah also highlights the broader theme of prophetic suffering and martyrdom in the Old Testament. His death, alongside those of other prophets, paints a grim picture of the resistance faced by God's messengers. Yet it also underscores their unwavering commitment to their divine calling, even in the face of mortal danger. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more of our content. Thank you for watching and be blessed.